Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots. Bootlicker, shills, dustlight, search passes, fassels, meat sacks. I'm a useful idiot, and today I'm going to talk about Libya. Since no one else is talking about Libya, I'll talk about Libya. So, real hot topic, so that'll guarantee that I'll get lots of views on this. And the interesting thing that I'm referencing to, of course, is the fact that Libya is a forgotten situation for most Americans, and that's the way the handlers like it. So we have a lot of activity in Libya these days, and they've pretty much descended into chaos since the NATO U.S. intervention of 3 years ago, by the way. It's about 3-year anniversary. So we have a country overrun by militias in a gigantic power vacuum, in a country that's already divided. And this is very similar to situations we see in Iraq, and we've seen it before, and we're going to see it again. And we're seeing elements of what's unfolded in both in Iraq and in Libya. We're seeing certain elements of that showing up in the Ukraine as well. But let's get back to Libya. So what's going on now is that since July and August, there's been essentially a eastern region that has declared autonomy. 3 major ports have been seized in the eastern province, and the controlling apparatus is called the Cyrenaica Political Bureau. And incidentally, it's run by the organization that was set up by the government in order to protect the petroleum supplies and petroleum facilities, and it's been doing pretty good for the most part. But recently, it has been that region has been taken over, and the oil been commandeered, and so oil exports from Libya have come to a standstill. And there's speculation there's anywhere from 2,000 to 20,000 rebels in this eastern province, and they're offering to sell oil. And this is where things get interesting, because the government's given them several ultimatums, and now we have government troops actually going and attacking the eastern rebels. And this occurred about a week and a half ago. And in March 17th, about a week ago, we actually had U.S. Navy SEALs there take control of a mystery oil tanker that showed up at this rebel Libyan port. So very interesting development. But let's get back to where we are with Libya. I've done a number of videos about Libya and the aftermath there, and it's no surprise that, especially with no direct U.S. intervention, thank goodness in this situation, the country has descended into chaos with all those familiar elements. We have a power vacuum with various factions vying for power. We have all old regime loyalists with different affinities. And we have a country divided, and then also introduced to that a number of foreign radical jihadis groups. In fact, we have 1,700 different armed groups in Libya now, and there are daily assassinations, kidnappings, and bombings. And you pretty much know a country's descended into chaos when essentially there's no news reports of the fact that there's assassinations, kidnappings, and bombings every day. And well, like I say, we have this situation in Iraq as well. And it's kind of interesting as well to look at the roster of these armed factions that we have in Libya. So here's a country that's essentially on its knees after having its infrastructure destroyed during the NATO intervention, and yet we have a plethora of different militias and armed groups as part of the government. So in the government, we have the actual Libyan army, who are generally capable, but barely that. And then we have the Libya Revolutionaries Operations Room, interesting name. That was a militia that was in charge of security in Tripoli, but they've been removed from that responsibility because some members of that militia ended up kidnapping the prime minister themselves, although later releasing them. And then we have the National Security Directorate, which is the police. Then we have the Al-Qaeda forces, which are the special forces, the commandos, the actual trained military that that Libya has at its disposal. They have an anti-crime unit, which is different than their national security director or police. And then we have a special deterrence force on top of that deals with drug crimes in Libya, oddly enough. And then the Petroleum Facilities Guard, which of course is now the group that is now commandeering the eastern province and declaring autonomy. And then the Libya Shield Force, which is the main conglomerate of militias who are on the government payroll, which is also precarious. But then on top of that, we have all the various militias. And without going into the details, there's an attachment below that goes into more detail about all these individual groups if you want to know more. But the militias, we have the Al-Zintan Revolutionaries Military Council, the Al-Qaqa Brigade, the Al-Sawaiq Brigade, the Misrata Brigade, the 17th of February Martyrs Brigade, the Rafala al-Sahati Brigade, and the Ansar al-Sharia Brigade. And so these are just the major militias. So when they talk about 1,700 armed groups, they're talking about the fact that we have all these different security forces working for the Libyan government. We have all these major militias. Then we have a bunch of splinter militias and offshoot militias and tangent militias. And then just random security groups for different villages in different regions, all adding up to this huge plethora of armed militias. And that's part of the problem in Libya right now, is trying to control all these militias and keep them in line with the government. And a lot of these elements, as we remember, are Al-Qaeda. And so that is part of the fabric of this country now. And then, as I've done videos before, we have a huge amount of weapons being sold out of Libya because we have this kind of chaos situation, this failed state. We have all kinds of weapons and foot soldiers going to wage chaos all over North Africa and the Middle East. And so that's going to continue to take its toll because the situation is not under control. So we see Libya, this NATO success, 3 years later descending further into chaos, and American troops apparently at the beck and call for certain incidents. We have potentials for civil war, we have potential for anarchy, and we have potential for more violence erupting on unprecedented scale again. And it also brings up a good question for me, which is, once again, I know a lot of people feel strongly about the Benghazi incident, but I say that I would be surprised if something like that didn't happen. It's amazing that we even had an embassy there, we had an ambassador there, and then also the fact that because this ambassador was in Libya, we have all the more reason to believe that unlike the boutique jobs that most ambassadorships are around the world, in Libya, he was undoubtedly working in an intelligence capacity and might have found himself in that precarious position because of just the very nature of the beast, this collapsed country of Libya. So once again, I proffer that it's more surprising that it didn't happen sooner than it did happen, and nobody should be surprised. I don't think it really had anything to do with leadership. It's just the wrong place at the wrong time for the wrong reasons. And that sums up Libya pretty well. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.